trauma-informed services in care and school settings. Segment 3, On the Ground, Head Start.
For generations, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian peoples have faced an ongoing crisis of violence, human trafficking, and an epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous people, also known as MMIP. In fact, Native Americans face a disproportionately high rate of violence. The lasting impact of this ongoing crisis can be felt across Indian country, urban areas, and beyond. More work must be done in order to build a safe and healthy tribal communities and keep our Indigenous people and communities whole. My name is Chance Rush, Executive Director of Our Native Men. I'm Hidatsa and enrolled with the 3 affiliated tribes on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation. Join us as we consider a path away from consistently repairing the damage that violence causes and start to consider how we, together, can begin the work on keeping us whole. During this podcast series, I will be your guide throughout the country as we speak to Indigenous people from across Turtle Island on how we can engage proactively to prevent MMIP. We'll speak with tribal leaders, community organizers, academic experts, and of course, our partners at the Administration for Native Americans, the Department of Health and Human Services, and other government agencies engaged in this work.
Episode 2, Protecting Our Children. Segment 2, Comprehensive and Trauma-Informed Services in Care and School Settings. This segment will focus on comprehensive and trauma-informed services in care and school settings. We will define the phrase trauma-informed and what this means in the context of teachers and other caregivers working with young children. We will discuss the positive impacts that trauma-informed approaches have on children and how these impacts and other protective factors play a role in reducing the risk of Indigenous girls and boys becoming murdered or missing. We will also discuss what more is needed to bring these practices and approaches to Head Start, childcare, and other programs and practitioners serving young children throughout Indigenous communities. Episode 2, Protecting Our Children. Segment 2, Comprehensive and Trauma-Informed Services in Care and School Settings. Dr. Amy Wolferman, M.E.D., Director, School-Based Training and Technical Assistance, National Native Children's Trauma Center, NNCTC. Episode 2, Protecting Our Children. Segment 2, Comprehensive and Trauma-Informed Services in Care and School Settings. Kimee Hummingbird, Muscogee Nation, Cherokee. Training and Technical Assistance, National Native Children's Trauma Center, NNCTC.
This is Chance Rush. I hope you guys are doing good. Thank you guys for joining the podcast, man. I'm so grateful that I had the opportunity to team up with ANA, the Administration for Native Americans, and Our Native Men have teamed up to bring you guys some really cool, informative, fun, and important podcast series, Keeping Us Whole, Preventing Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons. And this is episode 2, segment 2. And I'm so excited to have the privilege to bring these young ladies up here from the NNCTC, National Native Children's Trauma Center. So we're very grateful to get this program started. I know that we've been listening to the first episode, and we're just so grateful that we can have this episode, which we are talking about protecting our children. And so, the second segment here, more grateful, informative information. And I really mean that when I say grateful. I mean, because the series has been phenomenal as far as getting everything, technology, getting everything, lined up, for the betterment of our community. So without further ado, I would like to bring up these 2 young ladies. First, we have Amy Foster Wolferman coming to us. Amy Foster Wolferman is our Director for School-Based Training and Technology Assistance over at the National Native Children's Trauma Center. So let's welcome her to the podcast. How you doing there? How you doing, Amy?
Really good. Good. Thanks for having me.
Yes, well,
Yesterday.
we're so excited to have you. And also with her this afternoon is we have Kimee, Kimee Hummingbird, or I apologize, Kimee Wynn Hummingbird, Muscogee Creek Nation, Sapulpa, Oklahoma. She's with us. Let's please welcome her to the cast. How you doing, man? All right,
Hi.
girls. You know what? I just like playing with this little machine here. So that's why I'm just pushing all kind of crazy buttons and all that. How you doing today, Kimee?
Great. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. Shout out to Saptown.
Uh-oh, Sap in the house, Chieftains in the house. I hope I hope you guys are all doing well. And again, both these young ladies are coming to us from the National Native Children's Trauma Center, and we're just so grateful that you guys can take time out of your schedule. So thank you guys for being here with us on Chance with Greatness, being presented by the Administration for Native Americans. Um, our podcast series. Today's episode is protecting our children, keeping us whole, preventing missing and murdered Indigenous persons, and we're so grateful that we can hear this and we get to see this. So, hey, without further ado, we'll get started here. And how's everything been going with you there, Amy?
Things are good. We are quite busy in our work. I think especially with the pandemic, there's more and more of an interest in trauma-informed supports and services. So yeah, it's never a dull moment in our place.
Right. What about you, Kimee? I'm going to ask you this a little later on, but like, how are you doing, and how's the transition? And I know you've been with him for a little bit, but how's everything going with you?
No, it's great. I'm excited to be a part of the team. And I think it's been a challenge adjusting to the way that we interact with the families and the communities because of the global pandemic. But the outside of it is I hope that we're on the downside of it and we're able to go back and really enjoy our families and our communities as we have in the past. So things are going good here on the ground. Do miss connecting with our people and our communities, but I'm glad we found a new way to do that virtually. So thank you for having us.
Oh man, I'm so glad that we're able to do things virtually too. I don't know what I would do if we didn't have Zoom or during this time, but it's getting better. It's getting better. So we're glad we're here. Amy, it's so crazy. A few years back, we had the opportunity to do a program up in northern Cheyenne, and it's good to see you. I hope everything is going well with you. I see that you now are our director over there at the National Native Children's Trauma Center. And can you tell us a little bit more about this program here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's really good to see you. That was a good time supporting youth over there with that Sources of Strength program. But our trauma center, the National Native Children's Trauma Center, I'm not the director. Our director is...
okay, I'm sorry.
But I'm director of school-based training and technical assistance. Our director is the beloved Megan Rides at the Door.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we are housed in the College of Education at the University of Montana, and that's in Missoula, Montana, over in western part of the state. Go Grizz. So if you're a football fan. But we were first funded as a trauma center back in 2003. And at the time, we were using a trauma-focused intervention directly with youth, and it was called Cognitive Behavioral Interventions for Trauma in Schools. It's an evidence-based intervention. We've recently ended up adapting it so that we have a version that's more relevant for Native youth. But what we found was that this intervention did help decrease symptoms of child traumatic stress, depression, and anxiety. But we also found that just if a school just has a small group intervention, it's just not enough to address the high numbers of students in schools that we're seeing who are both experiencing trauma, but also having effects of trauma, so maybe traumatic stress symptoms. And I think it's really important to think of it in terms of just because a child has experienced trauma does not mean that they're struggling. It's that other piece of, if they have, then are they experiencing some symptoms? And so because mostly we are resilient, and that's why we're still here today, right? So but what we did find is that this intervention, in some cases, schools were screening in over 70% of students who had both experiences of trauma and also symptoms. And so it's just not enough to have this group intervention. So we, along with others in the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, we're part of that network as being a trauma center, and kind of all realizing collectively that group-based intervention is just not enough to reach all the kids that need support. And so, because it requires a mental health professional, which we often don't have in some of our rural communities. It's kids are on waiting lists. Getting parental permission can be a struggle. So we've really shifted towards thinking school-wide or system-wide, and how can we adopt trauma-informed policies, practices, procedures to reach more kids. And there's a lot of ways we can do that. And I can talk a bit more about what that looks like. But I think we've evolved to not just focusing on interventions, but looking agency-wide, but also looking outside and looking community-wide and looking at multiple agencies coming together. And so we've expanded to working with child welfare, juvenile justice, healthcare, as well as supporting whole communities. So it's really been a journey, and we're not alone in it.
Right. Man, and there's more information. I mean, I know, later on we'll have up on the screen, how we can get more information, regarding the center. So, I'll have some more questions for you too. But, matter of fact, why did you get involved in this line of work here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me at the time, I was working as an early childhood special education teacher. The center that was the host of our trauma center originally had an early intervention program and also some school safety center. And we were really focused on school safety and mental health. And then over time, we began learning that trauma was often underlying a lot of those safety and mental health issues, especially after 9/11, when the National Child Traumatic Stress Network was developed. So we were able to get some grant funding to focus on trauma, and we've never looked back. In fact, the only thing left in our program is our trauma center. And it really helped me as a teacher to better understand a lot of the different behaviors I was seeing in kiddos I was working with, and to see that these behaviors are really driven by fear. And so to have a trauma lens really supports care providers in being able to better prevent problems and to build up skills and resiliency in our kiddos. So then transferring that to, I'm now more of a trainer and consultant. I'm able to help share those kinds of understandings with other teachers and schools.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
How about you, Kimee? What got you in this line of work here?
Sure. Thank you. Just to give you a little background on me, as you know, my name is Kimee. I've worked in Indian child welfare for 22 years prior to joining the NNCTC team about 7 months ago. I worked for the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma in their Indian child welfare program, and then also for the Muscogee Creek Nation, their children and family services. And I resigned as their director about 7 months ago. And so my entire life's work has been working with Indigenous families and keeping them connected with their tribe and their culture and their family, most importantly. So I was fortunate that right out of school, I applied for a job. And I guess how I got involved in this work is that I've always been involved in youth camps, even through high school. And whenever I was playing ball in college, I would come home in the summer and work youth camps. And then after I graduated from school, one of the former council members, I did a camp for the Cherokee Nation that summer after I graduated. It was a JOM camp, and we took the students to Albuquerque. It was really just a lot of fun. But whenever we got back in town, a former council member told me, there's an opening in Indian child welfare. You should look into it. And my degree's not in social work. And so I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. So back in the day, I won't reveal my age, but it was long before Google and long before the internet. I got an encyclopedia with the encyclopedia and had to look up what Indian child welfare was. And I really was so lucky that they took a chance on a kid right out of school who didn't have a social work background to be a part of their family. And that's really what it was growing up over there. I say I grew up over there. It was a family. I learned the vast majority of the foundational information that I have about working with families. I learned over there at Cherokee Nation. And after I had been there, I'd always said, because I'm an enrolled citizen of the Muscogee Nation, but I'm also Cherokee by descendancy. But I'd always said, I want to go to the Muscogee Nation. I want to take back over there some of the things that I've learned over here. And so I got recruited to come work at the Muscogee Creek Nation whenever my children were getting older and in school, and I needed to be closer to home for ball games and such. And so I made the switch and came over there. So that's kind of how I got involved in this. I just grew up, being tied to the community and the youth and the work that we did there.
Right. Well, man, basketball player.
Well, my children were. I played basketball, but I'm more of a fast pitch player. So
Yeah. So did and we'll move on here. But did athletics or what drove you? I mean, I know that you guys enjoy this profession, but what drove you? Was it athletics? Was it coming from a big family? Was it being Creek? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of it kind of tie into that. But what drove you?
absolutely, it was sports. And I'll as we have the conversation further, I definitely going to talk about what that looks like in communities growing up connected to those. We know in Oklahoma, in the summertime, you generally at a basketball tournament or a softball tournament or volleyball tournament, and all of the even the little communities that we develop within those sports.
Yeah.
But absolutely, I'm a little bit embarrassed and ashamed to admit this now as an adult, but as as a young woman, just graduating from high school, I graduated whenever I was 17. There's the reason that I went to college was to play more ball. Absolutely. And I got a degree out of it. So it was great. But yeah, that was definitely my driving force, is because I had those connections to supportive adults and those connections to my teammates. And that's really what helped me along the way, and learning to work as a team, right? Because that's how we're always going to meet the needs of the families, getting the information from them and helping them be successful.
Yeah. And sports does a lot. Sports opens so many doors. How about you? What drove you, Amy?
Yeah, I think after high school, I got into working with youth outdoors, doing trail work, and riding on little planes and getting dropped off in the middle of the wilderness area, and like surviving together, group of 12 people, and somebody's got to get the water and somebody's got to make the food, and we just really need to help each other out. And I think that experience was so powerful to see how kids, teenagers could just build these bonds together and lift each other up. And they came in like one person, and they 6 weeks later left as another, just feeling really empowered. And I think that really made me start thinking I wanted to go into education and be a part of these, especially more experiential learning situations to help lift kids up. And so kind of went that way. Decided I couldn't, I woke up one morning in a tent with my hands kind of frozen together after working on a rock bar, I'll say. And like, I can't do this forever. It's going to break my back.
Yeah.
So I better go to college. But yeah, I wanted to work with youth and got into the education field.
Wow. Well, thank you. And we're all driven by something, right? Hey, listen, before we go on, you are listening to Keeping Us Whole, presented by the Administration for Native Americans and Our Native Men. Today's episode is Protecting Our Children. And with us today, we have Amy Wolferman and Kimee Hummingbird of the National Native Children's Trauma Center. And, that's one thing I get inspired, when I talk to, leaders such as yourself, like what drove you. And that's what's so important, is that this can't just be a job. This can't just be, a paycheck or an opportunity. It has to be a way of life, So I had to ask you guys, that question there, on that. I'm going to go over here to you real quick, Amy. When you use the phrase trauma informed, could you please define what that means in the context of teachers and other caregivers who work with young children?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's trauma informed is really, it's about developing an awareness across staff. If we're talking about agencies like early childhood programs, so across staff and the agency, about trauma, how prevalent it is in the lives of those being served, as well as within our own selves and our colleagues that we're working with. Is understanding all those pieces of historical trauma as a context for a lot of the trauma that we are experiencing today, and how it can show how trauma shows up in people. So kind of developing that, we call it the trauma lens or trauma goggles, like we see beneath the surface of what's going on with someone, so we can better help them. And it's understanding that experiences of trauma can lead us to act out of fear, because kids we're working with might behave in ways that we just don't understand. They might become really defiant or aggressive, or on the other end of the scale, completely shut down. And we might not really think that we might think that they're being trying to be defiant or oppositional or disrespectful or whatever we might assume, but a lot of times it's just that they're feeling scared, out of control. Maybe they were triggered by something in their environment, or something reminded them of a fearful situation, so it puts them in that survival mode of fight, flight, or freeze. Mm-hmm. And it's not something that can easily be controlled. So just understanding that. So if we create safe and supportive settings to help reduce that fear-based response to their environment, allow that survival brain to just settle and calm and be able to, engage in the moment and know that they're cared for, and having adults who have that understanding, but who also understand the power of their own affect, their own energy, their own emotions, and how that can impact kids. So kind of working to make that in that calm state, so they can be the rock, that solid rock for the child who might be really stressed. But it's also about consistent, predictable environments, so kids know what to expect. It can reduce levels of anxiety. It's helping staff understand ways of helping kids de-escalate. So shifting away from using really harsh disciplinary techniques, and really aiming to use discipline that teaches and is supportive, and it's about teaching kids skills. So what am I feeling inside? What's this experience that I'm having inside? What's happening in my mind and my body and my emotions? How can I regulate those things? How can I express what I'm feeling and what I'm needing? And also about teaching and supporting the development of positive identity. So connection with culture, being a part of that, and really trying to lift up our kids who are often walking around with these feelings of shame or guilt related to trauma, and and feeling sometimes a sense of I deserved to be treated badly. I'm not worthy So trying to build up those things. And I think one of the most important, and I'll finish with this one, is that the most important trauma-informed practice is building trusting relationships with youth, because trauma typically occurs within the context of relationships. So building those relationships can be really healing. And it's a certain kind of relationship. It's that someone's always got your back. There's someone who's, even when you mess up, they're still going to be there for you, and it's consistent, and you can trust them. So when I think of trauma-informed, those are some of the key concepts that come to mind. There's a lot more, but I think those are really powerful.
Well, you said that you said something that was really important when you talked about, feeling shamed or whatever it may be. That's one thing that we all need to understand. We need to get it when it comes to encouraging young people who are dealing with trauma. We need to get it, before we can get involved with it. One thing that I think of when I hear the word, trauma, is I think that, we have to be encouragers and not people who have expectations, like with our children, whatever it may be. Yeah. We may have expectations when it comes to, what you have to do to be better in the classroom, on the field, things that you need to do to better yourself. We may have expectations for our children, but in all, we have to encourage them. We have to encourage before we can have expectations. And what you said is right on. When it comes to the whole thing about the FFF. We don't want people to take off. We don't want people to flight. So we have to encourage before we can have expectations. And that's somewhat hard to do. But it's important. We need to get it. We need to get it, and we need to be a part of this movement. So. Good info there. Hey, listen, Kimee, I have a two-part question for you here. Is what positive impacts can trauma-informed approaches have on children, and how do these impacts and other protective factors play a role in reducing the risk of Indigenous girls and boys becoming murdered or missing?
Okay, thanks. So we know that protective factors don't eliminate the effects of trauma, but they can balance those effects out, soften them, and provide stability even in the face of severe stress. When several protective factors are in place, children and young people can thrive in spite of their exposure to very serious traumatic events. Even adults who may have been struggling with significant trauma for years can build resilience and change the path that they're on. As Amy mentioned, researchers have consistently found that the single most important protective factor for children who experience adversity and stress is having at least one solid and trusting relationship with a supportive adult. Healing after trauma can begin to occur when we see that there are actually people who we can trust. They say they won't expose us to harm or danger, and they don't. Those relationships are key to the development of the child. Also, in my experience growing up, and even as a mother, I know when we were at certain events within the community, we talked about ball games earlier, there were always constant eyes on my children. Even though the children may have been given the space to freely roam throughout the event, someone was always watching. For instance, I have a great friend who trains forensic interviewers in the state of Oklahoma. She and I have known each other professionally and outside of conference rooms as well. I've heard her speak about her realization of her own implicit bias. When I'm present, she always mentions how she and I came to know each other. Her husband is a softball umpire. She knew me from my role in Indian child welfare, and we developed a personal friendship from there as she traveled with her husband to umpire many adult Indian fast pitch tournaments around Oklahoma. As she speaks of our friendship, she also refers to the first Cherokee holiday fast pitch tournament she attended with her husband. She sets the stage by talking about the large number of people and how there was generally an open field for the children to play together. And I did the same thing growing up, and my children enjoyed that time too. We all gathered on that field and played cut ball or kickball, or if somebody actually had a ball and a bat, we grabbed it and started playing. She told the audience that her CPS brain, her investigative brain, was always like, oh my gosh, where are the parents? Oh no, I hope something bad doesn't happen to the kids. And she always talks about this one point that she can remember. She didn't see any adults near the children and on the children's field, but she would occasionally like look over her shoulder to make sure that the kids were okay. Mm-hmm. And she described how she saw a foul ball headed toward the field. And before she could even turn around in her seat to see if there was an injured child, there were instantly multiple adults on the field with their children. She said in that moment, she realized that she had never even imagined that there were constantly so many eyes on the children, that parents playing on their fields or fans watching weren't only there for the games, but for the kids too. She said that was truly eye-opening for her. Just because she didn't see them, she thought that nobody was paying attention to the children. My girls spent a lot of time in dugouts as babies. We had playpens, and whoever wasn't in the field watched the little ones. Then as they grew, they would chase foul balls, and everyone knew the children, and they were always watching out for them. I grew up in the same way. So most of our communities have always had a communal approach to child rearing. This is a protective factor. Do we have the remedy to prevent our children from being taken or murdered? I wish we did. I know everyone would absolutely share that cure widely, but unfortunately we don't. But we do have some protective factors in place, even if others think no one else is watching.
Wow. Very well spoken. Man,
Thank you.
Very well spoken. Man, that's good.
Thank
Very
you.
well spoken. Man, you guys, phenomenal. Listen, we are here with two of the best right here. Man, I'm so glad we got Amy and Kimee on with us. And I don't know, it's just me. I mean, you're making me miss my Oklahoma roots because, we always, it's so crazy, Amy. We always have these conversations when you're native and you're from Oklahoma. The first thing that radars up is, it's either what do you dance or what sport do you play, So, makes me miss Oklahoma, but I'm glad I'm down here in Dallas, Texas. So, moving right along here, we just have a few more questions for each one of you. And again, thank you guys for joining us this afternoon. Amy, what more is needed to bring these practices and approaches to Head Start, childcare, and other programs that practitioners serving young children?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say that we need a lot more education always and access to resources, but we also really need people who are driven and committed to engage in the journey, right? So you can get as much training as you can, but if we don't have that passionate group of committed people, it's really hard to make change because it is about whole school and whole systems change, and it's a long-term process, and it takes patience and that persistence. And so we've been talking about trauma nationally for a couple of decades now. There's a lot of great information about trauma-informed practices and approaches and about historical trauma and the ACE study, but it's just not in the hands of those who are caring for our children. There's so much of the trauma-informed work has really lived in the mental health field, and it's slowly working its way into other areas like schools. And like teachers who go to college to become teachers, teacher prep schools, they don't learn about trauma. We're not there yet. We're not there in terms of preparing our care providers or professional care providers. And so there are great resources, but it's really difficult to sift through everything that's out there. There isn't one model to turn to, or there's not a how-to cookbook. It's really this long-term journey that requires a team effort. It's learning about trauma, but also about what it means for you and your own community, your own agencies. It's collectively knowing what's our trauma story, and it's identifying practices and approaches that work for us here. Maybe it's some evidence-based Western practice or maybe it's local cultural traditional practices, but really identifying what would work for us here. So what we try to do is engage with an agency, maybe a school, an early childhood program, several agencies or community team and support them in becoming more trauma informed. And we can share, again, knowledge about trauma and trauma-informed practices and resources, but not what trauma means here in this place or what will work here or what already works here. So we walk alongside that team of committed, passionate people and support however we can.
Very good. Very good. The episode before this, we had Mary Catherine Nagel, attorney at law, and I was asking her about, how can sovereignty play its part and its role in MMIP, and the different rights, and whether it's funding to more resources is what I'm trying to say. And so my final question this afternoon, Kimee, is how can you bring an ICWA perspective to the National Native Children's Trauma Center, and what resources could you see going toward seeking and finding and the movement of MMIP?
Absolutely. And I think awareness is key. Just knowing what a trauma-informed lens looks like. I've had the opportunity in my many years to come to know a lot of different Indian child welfare programs working across Indian country. And I also acknowledge the fact, too, that there are 574 federally recognized tribes and a few hundred that are state recognized. And it's been my experience that their Indian child welfare programs are vastly different. Not better, not worse, just different. And it's always interesting to me that those outsider communities, whenever they hear about some of the services that we offer to our families, they tend to talk about, oh my gosh, that's state of the art, or that's so informative and so gold standard, or just so ahead of the curve. But in actuality, it's us using the guiding principles that we've had within our tribes and our communities since time immemorial. It's about us knowing we're the experts in our communities. We know what's right here, what works here. And while we do have friends outside of our tribal communities that can definitely come in and provide us with tools to better serve our families, we are the ones on the ground in the communities that are responsible for enhancing those services to our families. And so it's about us as tribal peoples wanting to ensure the safety and well-being of our community as a whole, and to provide a safe haven for everyone who lives within our communities. It's important that we acknowledge that we have those tools within us, and it just takes the ability for us to just step back and think, okay, what do we have internally? How can we best meet the needs of these families? I think that's important. And again, you mentioned sovereignty. It's so important that be recognized, that because we are all sovereign nations, our independent nations have the right to govern our people the way that they choose to do so. And in addition to that, they write the policies and procedures and put in the practices into place for all of the child serving systems within our nations. So and I've had the opportunity since I've been with NNCTC for the last 7 months to meet some amazing tribal leadership from across the country that recognize that the youth are hurting, and now is the time. And I think really we've had these issues for a long period of time, but because of COVID and our we were we were quarantined and we were separated from the rest of our community and our support systems for so long, that it's really come to a head right now. And there's been so many times that we've had these conversations with other nations about how can we help. We need to check in right now, and we need to make sure that we're serving all of our children and our families with this trauma-informed lens to meet them where they are and provide them with the best possible care that we can to ensure the well-being of the community as a whole.
Wow, man, good stuff. Good stuff. Man, you girls didn't even need me. You guys had this down today. Man, we're so grateful. Thankful. We have Amy Foster Wolferman, director of social-based training and technical assistance over at the National Native Children's Trauma Center. And we also, 7 months into it, Muscogee Creek Nation, Kimee Wynn, Hummingbird, Training and Technical Assistance Specialist. You've been listening to our second segment of episode 2. Don't forget to join me immediately following this. We're going to have Patricia White Temple, Nimi Poo, Nez Perce tribe should be joining us a little later on. She is our education child development specialist. Hey, listen, let everyone know that you can listen to our podcast series being presented by the Administration for Native Americans. Thank you guys very much for joining us. One more time, let's give Kimee and Amy round of applause. Let them hear you. Let them hear you. All right. Well, hey guys, listen. What a great segment. What a great session. I hope they're still backstage. I have a bunch of questions for them, but don't forget to join us and stay with us. We just heard from Mary Catherine Nagel. Then we had Amy Foster, Wolferman, as well as Kimee Wynn, Hummingbird. They got 2 last names. Man, maybe I should get 2 last names. But join us as we continue our series on protecting our children. We will have Patricia White Temple coming up next. Okay. Hey, Chance Rush in the building, Chance with Greatness, our Native Man. We want to thank the administration for Native Americans for this opportunity. All right. We are out of here. All right. You guys have a good one. Hope you guys enjoyed this second segment of episode 2. All right.
Please visit the following websites to identify federal resources to assist communities in preventing MMIP. The Administration for Children and Families ACF MMNA Framework landing page. https://www.acf.hhs.gov/ANA/MMNA-framework. ACF's Family and Youth Services Bureau, Domestic Violence Resource Network. https://www.acf.hhs.gov/FYSB/FV-centers. The Administration for Native Americans Domestic Violence Awareness Public Service Announcements. https://www.acf.hhs.gov/ANA/domestic-violence-PSAs. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Violence Prevention Resource page. https://www.cdc.gov/violence prevention. U.S. Department of Interior's Indian Affairs Missing and Murdered Unit, www.bia.gov/service/MMU. The U.S. Department of Justice MMIP landing page, www.justice.gov/tribal/MMIP. We would like to thank all the speakers for their time, support, and dedicated commitment to the MMIP podcast series. Through continued advocacy and collaboration, we can work together to end the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people, MMIP. The views and opinions of featured speakers on the MMIP podcast series are solely theirs and should not be attributed to the Department of Health and Human Services, the Administration for Children and Families, or the Administration for Native Americans.